There's a great question, a mysterious question that always seems to enter the mind of humanity, sooner or later. And the answer to that question can either be entirely dismissed as being too amazing, too fantastical, and therefore it cannot possibly be true based on how we experience this world currently. And that question concerns what happens? Where do we go when we were to pass away? Because people are obviously curious about that at some level of their being. Now, a certain percentage of people will simply say, well, when we pass away, my only conclusion is that nothing will happen. We will fade into nothingness. It will be all over. There will be nothing. You'll just be gone and there's nothing left. There's total darkness and nothingness. Yeah, that's basically what it sounds like, to me at least, when you say that. Then there's others that say, well, you go to heaven or you go to hell. Then there's others again that say, based on their out-of-body experience as well, it seems that you are entering different realms of some kind. And they can be described as heaven and or as scary, which could be considered a hell of some kind. So they're pretty similar as the other group that just simply believes in heaven and hell, but they have no personal experience. The ones with an out-of-body experience basically have some kind of experience of being outside of their body, apparently. That's the mysterious part. It becomes so mysterious, right? So here we are. We are facing a situation where it's like, if we hadn't got the experience of being outside of the body, supposedly, then hearing it, well, we can either believe it or dismiss it and think it's nonsense because we ourselves, perhaps, have never had that experience. So how can that possibly be true, right? That's where we're usually at. Now, for me, I wouldn't necessarily say that I had an out-of-body experience in the sense that it was due to being almost dead, because that's what we're talking about, actually. I should have said near-death experience. That's what they are technically called. Because out-of-body experience is more like astral projection. That's like, again, it's all actually very similar and related, of course, to each other, but they have all these different terms for it by now. I could say that I have had experiences like that of some kind where I have been aware of being in worlds. We would call them dream worlds, and I would be aware, and I could not deny that now that I'm here, this is just as real as the reality I'm experiencing right now, in which I'm recording this video for you to listen to. So that is really, it's kind of like a mind F. You know, a mind, the F word? That's what it is. At first, you're like, on reflection, you're gonna realize, oh, wait a minute. When I was in that supposed dream world, it was, I cannot deny that I literally had evidence when looking around. I'm in another world. I can't explain it, but I'm well aware that I'm not on planet Earth. And I'm also aware that somewhere on planet Earth, I have a body that is asleep. But here I am having yet another body moving through a totally different reality. So for me, that already is personal experience on the evidence that there apparently exist different dimensions and realms in this universe, you could say, for lack of better words. How would we call it? Another planet? Well, I could say that, but again, I can't 100% say that it wasn't necessarily a planet. It's like a world inside your own consciousness, basically. So is that where we're going? Could that be the direction in which we go once we pass away? Well, let's have a look here at Neville Goddard. He was asked a question in one of his lectures, and the student, or at least the person in the audience, asked, when we die, where do we go? Now this was his answer, and that's what I wanted to share with you through this video mostly, and then discuss about it. He said, this seems to be the height of vanity, based upon what we know about our biological human body, and what our scientists tell us about it. But you dreamed yourself into being, and the dreamer cannot be destroyed by his dream. You may dream the most horrible dream in the world. You may dream of dying, but you can't be destroyed by your dream. As you dreamed yourself into being here, you will dream yourself into being there. My mother was only 61 when she left here, but she looked 90 because she had suffered so for 2 years, and her lovely form had withered before our eyes. I have seen her at the age of 20, radiantly beautiful. I remained my age, but she looked much, much younger. but the relationship of mother and son was still there. My father passed away at the age of 85. I've seen him several times since, and he has never been over 50. You see, we are dreaming. You will find yourself not only in a world just as real as this, but the world may not be in the year, in that case 1966, that was the present time for him, but it may be the year 3002, and it will be just as natural and normal to you as this year of 1966. No loss of identity. You will find yourself in an environment best suited for the work yet to be done in you. Now you read this, and if you've not have any experience on this for yourself, you are either going to accept it or dismiss it as bizarre, as totally crazy almost. You're like, this guy has lost his mind. But if you've had the experience, you can't deny there's something to what he said. And I can confirm from experience that I have had these things happen to me. Personally, that I know that he's not talking nonsense, but it is just a giant mysterious thing, even to me to a certain extent still. Because he said here that he dreamed of his mother who had passed away. She was 61, but she looked 90, so he's talking about how she looked physically speaking, don't forget it. So she was apparently very sick in the final years of her life, so that's why she seemed to age so much physically. She looked like older than she actually was because of perhaps being not in great health at the time anymore. But then he went on to say, I have seen her at the age of 20. So here he's talking. Here's talking about a totally different realm in which he met his own mother. Now, I can confirm this from experience. A couple of years ago, see, my mother passed away in 2008. She was in her 50s. But when I saw her a few years ago, I think it was 2018 that it first happened, this very mysterious vision came upon me as my body was asleep. And I saw this young woman, and she too, in my case, looked like she was, I would say, in her early 20s. But I knew that was my mother. Like, I could literally sense it. So he even described it. The relationship of mother and son was still there, even though you are by now, I was by now older than my mother would be over there. I know it sounds crazy at first, but that's what happened to me as well, and to Neville apparently too. So then my mother, this younger woman, actually asked me how I was doing. So how has it been going by now? I told her back then, how can this happen? Because I know you passed away, Mom. What happened? And she simply told me, well, the universe has given me a new life. Has renewed my life. That's basically what it came down to. And so it was true. She was restored into a young body, or at least that's what she had manifested for herself again. And then I woke from the vision. Now, I have also seen other people like that who passed away, but perhaps they were less majestic to me because, well, they weren't necessarily people that I had a strong particular bond with, physically speaking. They were just people that I knew passed away, and then randomly they showed up. I remember even after my mentor passed away a couple months ago. Very briefly, a few brief times, he showed up in my dream world, and he would just advise me. He would tell me something like, hey, don't forget about working on the paradigms, tell humanity, always this subconscious programming of them that needs to be in alignment with their dream, then they can win, come on. So I was like, yeah, I remember that, and we will keep talking about some planet Earth, don't worry. So it was brief like that. Again, some people will either believe me on this or they think I'm crazy, they will dismiss it. So that there contains the answer to this great question that exists within humanity. What happens? Where do we go when we pass away? You can either believe this or dismiss it. But I too would say that you will manifest yourself into a different world. And as crazy as it sounds, because with this body, physically speaking, we have evidence we can't manifest it into something different instantly. And it takes time. If we want to adjust the body physically, we can do that through surgery and stuff. And that's the thing. Because this particular dimension of our being works in a very slow way. Neville Goddard would say this regularly as well, that time and stuff moves in a very slow manner over here. And therefore it kind of misleads us. It kind of blinds us to these things, where there are other realms where time doesn't exist, and therefore you can manifest whatsoever you desire. I have done this, so I cannot deny this to you. I have been in such dimensions where I would think of something and it would instantly manifest. I would think of a location and instantly the whole world around me changed itself around into that location. I know it sounds bizarre. If you've never had this experience, it cannot be anything other than that sounds like science fiction. What is going on? Well, that's exactly what you'll be experiencing yourself once it happens to you. You see the whole world collapse in front of your eyes. And then it starts to rise up again and suddenly you're in Paris or something, wherever you want to be. And you could look around at the Eiffel Tower. Because ultimately, this is the beauty of it all. As I said in the last video as well, the whole world exists within your consciousness. That is the beauty of this all, because once you understand this, you will never fear anything that's going to happen to your body ever again. The only fear you might have, and that I might still have, is, well, you know, if something hurts a lot, physically speaking, it might be very uncomfortable. So that might be the only sort of fear I would technically perhaps have, where it's like, it's going to be a little uncomfortable, this passing away process, because of the way this body is currently. But, you know, once we get through that, just like when you fall asleep at night, you dream yourself into being in another world. And I myself have started to consider this as well a couple of times in general, whenever I would notice myself being aware in these other realms, where I would think to myself, have I been manifest myself into physicality? Is this another dream of some kind? Is it really a dream? If so, what would happen if I stop caring about the dream? Well, to a certain extent, it's totally logical to consider, well, then your whole life will become a mess. It will fall apart. But if you do this in wisdom, if you stop being attached to your dream, physically speaking, well, then you will actually awaken to greater and greater truths about yourself and the universe. And I wanted to add to this whole answer that Neville gave something from the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the most ancient spiritual texts from India, which is also very in alignment with biblical text times, because this is what it said in one of their scriptures. My true being is unborn and changeless. I am the Lord who dwells in every creature. Through the power of my own Maya, I manifest myself in finite form. So here, Maya was considered a symbolical word for God's magic. So this mysterious magical process that created physicality as we know it, and that has manifested us into a physical body as we know it. That's what they're talking about. So through this power, God is doing that. He manifests himself in a finite form. Then it goes on to say, those who know me as their own divine self break through the belief that they are the body and are not reborn as separate creatures. Such a one is united with me, delivered from selfish attachment, fear and anger, filled with me, surrendering themselves to me, purified in the fire of my being. Many have reached the state of unity in me. So here, if you understand this, there's some key words here concerning the mystery of what happens if we pass away. He said, or the scripture said, those who know me as their own divine self break through the belief that they are the body and are not reborn as separate creatures. So from that statement alone, we can conclude that we are here as separate individuals because, again, of a certain fall in consciousness. We stopped, believing in God. Literally, we stopped being in unity with God, with the cosmic soul. We wanted individuality, we got it. That's how we manifested ourselves into time-space reality, to become an individual expression of life. But now we see all the suffering and all the hardships that we experience as an individual and want to reunite ourselves with God. And that is the goal. Because in doing so, we'll be lifted up into a world of bliss. But we won't lose ourselves. We will become united with God, with this cosmic soul. And we will share in his bliss at that point. That is the promise. That is what all these ancient scriptures are talking about, that this can happen to humanity at large eventually if they're ready. But until then, for us individually, we can already work upon this. So it also went on to say that we had to get rid of our selfish attachment and fears and angers, and instead fill ourselves with me, which is the I am nature. From scripture, I am is the name of the Lord, of God. You fill yourself with God's presence. You surrender yourself to God, and you become purified in his being. Now, it also said that many have already reached this state of unity in me. That's true, because all those ancient scriptures that are written by people that at least made the claims that they had achieved it, and their hope was that we, future generations, would achieve it as well, that we would not get lost in the physical world alone and forget all about the spiritual stuff that is also going on behind the physical matter, so to speak. So your answer, if you've ever wondered about it time and time again, we will say, and I will agree with Neville, you dreamt yourself into being, in the sense of you wanted to be an individual expression of life. You wanted to become that. Well, perhaps while you decided to do that, whether we truly realized or didn't realize at the time what kind of horrors would be in store for us at first, well, I don't know. That remains up for debate. Because some people live absolutely harsh lives. So we could logically reason, well, did they really choose to be there, to have that experience? Well, maybe not. But they probably, or at some level of their being, it is a fact they wanted to be an individual expression of life. That we can't deny. Because otherwise you wouldn't even be here. So you had that desire somewhere in the depths of your consciousness. But now the journey goes back towards God. But as Neville would say, you go back to God eventually with much greater awareness because of this individual experience you've had. With all these things that happen to you, good and bad. So ultimately they will gonna help you make your reunion. They will make that reunion with God extra magnificent because of all the things that you've went through, man. That's the beauty of spiritual awakening. And that's what's going to happen to you and me as well. So anyone that has passed away of you, know that they have manifested themselves into another world, into another realm. That's what happens to you as well. Every time you go to sleep, you dream yourself into being into a different realm. Well, that's what's gonna happen when you pass away as well. You can either believe it or dismiss it. It's up to you. But I hope you will accept it, because it can really make you think about life in a much greater way and reveal much greater truths to you as time goes on. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.